So if you're logging on, let me know if you can see me and let me know if you can hear me. Okay, Facebook says we're doing okay, so we're doing okay. Excellent. New year, January 4th. We're doing it. New year, same old Monday. Awesome. So tonight we're going to talk about what a good student is and how to kind of cultivate a culture that your students want to learn in, but also in a culture that you want to teach in. So hopefully this will be super handy for both students and instructors. Excellent. YouTube is also working. Hello, Elise. So I kind of want to go about it from both perspectives, like what can instructors do to create these habits in students, but also what can the students themselves bring to the table to get the most out of it, especially in a group class environment, because I think that's the majority of what, as students, we probably, the majority of our training with an instructor is of group classes. And if you teach agility, you probably teach the majority of your teaching is group classes. So we're going to try and stick to that. But if you have specific questions about something else, just pop them into the comments. But we're going to try and stick to this topic of, my hair exploded in the rain today. It's terrible. We're going to try to stick to the topic of creating good habits in our students, which does start with good habits ourselves from the instructor role. So we do have to set up our students to be successful. We cannot, just like we can't just expect the dog to know what to do in every situation to make you happy. You have to train your students to have these habits, especially if they don't already come with those habits. And depending on your background or your student's background, those habits might not already be there. Okay. Right. Maybe you've never been coached like in other sports in another part of your life, or maybe your student has never been coached in any other part of their life or had this experience, or even had a good experience with a coach or instructor. So we do have to remember that we don't always know the learning history and the reinforcement history of our learners. So we do want to set up the environment so that the behaviors that we want happen. Okay. That does start with the instructor. I said this last week. It's something my mentor says, behaviors are caught, not taught. So how you interact, say at a seminar, because it's not often our students get to see the instructor be the student. So one way to do that is that if you're at a seminar and you, the instructor, has a working spot, you need to be acting the way you want your students to be acting, right? And that it may be showing up on time, being ready to go, like whatever you want your students to be doing, you need to be modeling for them. Notes. Do you take notes? Do you film everything? How you reward your dog, how you warm your dog up, all of those things, students really do look to their instructor to know what to do and what's expected. So any chance you can model that behavior, I want you to put in the effort to make sure that you are modeling that behavior that you want. Okay, so that's number one, is making sure that they see the behaviors that you want from them, okay, any chance you get. But the big thing is that the antecedent arrangements really matter. Okay, so that means you need to lay out the expectations that you have of your students. So if you would like them to show up at a specific time before their class, so let's say 15 minutes before their class starts, tell them that. So like when they sign up for a class that starts at 6:30, they should really be aiming to arrive at 6:15 so that they have plenty of time to potty their dogs, set their stuff up, get ready, because class starts at 6:30, right? That means that gives them a very clear criteria, but also it gives you a very clear criteria that you will start at 6:30. And so if they show up late and they are not ready to go at 6:30, they can go, oh, she really meant that. They really meant that they start at 6:30. And if I'm not here by 6:15 to be ready, I'm going to miss something important. But if you see them showing up at 6:25 and you hold the class, what have they learned? They've learned that you'll wait for them. And so you can, and so it feels like, and I used to do this, oh, I would wait. And it felt like, oh, I was just being nice. But then what would happen is I would be, that 5 minutes that I started maybe late turns into, now my class has run 10 minutes long. And now the next class is harder to start. So make the expectation of, and this is just an example, we can talk about any boundary or any expectation you want, but let's just talk about showing up on time because it's the first thing they have to do, is put it in writing that I would like you to show up at this point, this time, so that you can be ready to go when class starts at this time, and then hold them to that criteria. And I did on occasion, if the student was having trouble showing up and being ready to go at the start of class, I would have the conversation with them about, do you think maybe we can choose a different time? Okay. Or they would just show up late and they would work themselves in, and it would be fine, and they would still get enough out of the lesson. But that's for each individual student to kind of work through. But the takeaway here is put it in writing and put that expectation in writing and then hold them to it. Okay. So there has to be a different consequence if they show up late or not. Okay. I love sending out welcome notes for these things. Okay. Because it makes everything very easy. So even when even if it was classes that it was the exact same people and they would roll over, when I would bill them and I got all the roster ready to go, they would get the same welcome note every single time. So maybe once a month they were getting a welcome note again, right? And they may or may not have read it. I have no idea, but at least it was there to refer back on. Okay. So on top of the welcome note, put everything that you can think of that you want your student to be doing in there. When to arrive, where to park, where to potty their dogs, where to crate, where to set up their stuff, sort of thing. And also the flow of your class, right? There was a very specific question about how to get more engagement from students during class. And I think this is something that has to be really clear, because last week there was a student complaint about other students interjecting during their working time. But also I got a question this week about how to encourage more class engagement. See how those two things can almost conflict with each other? So as the instructor, you have to put in there how best to engage in your class, right? When do you want questions? Do you want them watching other students? Do you want them doing something else while they're watching, while someone else is working? What do you want them to be doing with their time during your class? Because some students will come in and they will want to hang on your every word automatically. They'll follow you around with a notebook and they'll ask you all sorts of questions, and they will just do that naturally while all the other classes are playing with their dogs or walking their dogs or talking to their friends or talking to students from another class. They might just not know what to do with their time. So they're filling it however they want to fill it. So keep that in mind too. If you want them out on the floor with you, invite them onto the floor with you. So make it easy. I know that I kind of had some classes that were more, they meshed better probably. They were all more, the dogs and the people were more similar. So they naturally kind of magnetize themselves towards watching each other. They were truly kind of invested and interested in watching all the others. And then I did have some mismatched classes where it wasn't as easy for the students to connect with one another, right? And learn something from the other students. So I would you have to try and kind of connect the dots for those students. Invite them onto the floor with you and, tell them and give them things to do. Teach them about what you're looking for if you want more engagement. Ask them to stand right here and see if they can see the dog do this, or see if they can see the handler do this, and how that works for whatever sequence you're running. But if they don't know that that's okay, they're not going to do it. And if you don't tell them specifically, hey, come stand here and look for this, they don't know how to fill their time. So you have to make it easy for them. It's a completely different example, but I know when we were bringing in completely new groups of people, they had never been to the facility, they had never trained dogs before. It was their first class, and the instructors were out in the parking lot showing them where to park. There was no guesswork on the students' part. So on week 1, they were met, shown where to park, shown which door to come in, shown where to put their stuff, and so forth and so forth and so forth. And so each week it was just their routine. Drive in, park here, bring my stuff in, leave the dog in the car while I bring my stuff in. All of these little details that matter, if they are made easy for the student will do them. But the student doesn't know you want them unless they're told you want them. Make sense? Doing okay? How are we doing? On the same thread of more student engagement and inviting them onto the floor, I liked to ask questions. Ask your students questions. If you're not getting questions from them, maybe if you give them questions to think about, it will spark a discussion, a conversation, little bit more conversation surrounding that lesson. Another great thing I really think helps is having clear themes or objectives for your classes. Okay, so kind of like I do with these talks, we have something to talk about. And so when you come, you've already maybe, when you come to watch, you're already maybe thinking about questions you want to ask me, or you're maybe already having ideas of your own because you knew what I was going to talk about tonight. But if it's a surprise, what you're going to train, your students don't know what you're going to be training, they don't have time to prepare. So it might also not be helping them because they need time to percolate on their ideas. So then maybe if they don't know what the lesson is about, they show up, they learn the lesson, but then they don't have questions until they go home, right? On their drive home, they're like, I should ask about that. And they may or may not remember to ask you next week, or it may or may not be something that they would email you about based on what we talked about last week, right? But if the theme or the objective for the class is kind of sent out ahead of time, I think it gives a student more time to prepare. And they come in just a little bit more excited about that lesson. And they're ready. They've already decided that this is what they need to work on. They already have questions. And I think it ends up working a lot better to have very clear themes or things that you're going to work on that the students know about in advance. So I'm going to grab this comment. Asking the students questions will give the instructors ideas, what they get out of the lesson, and on areas that the instructors may want to cover in the next lesson. Yeah, exactly. A good question to ask, especially at the end of a lesson, is, what did you learn today? That should be a question as a student that you're asking yourself anyways, because you should be learning something. Even if it's really small, there should be some little nugget of information that you got from that class. So as the instructor, if you ask that of your students, you're going to have that conversation, that back and forth, and it's probably going to give you both some ideas of what to train next. Okay. So that's kind of what the instructors can do, right? We can have welcome notes. We can have the clear antecedent arrangements. Do this here, do this here, do this here. Different consequences for showing up on time and not showing up on time. All of these things, right? We can make it easier for them. If we want to see the students warming up their dogs more, ask them to. It could be that maybe each dog was going to get 3 to 5 minutes. So I could just always tell students, we would have a running order. And so when the dog ahead of you was going, you need to be warming up your dog. And then when the dog after you is going, you should be cooling down your dog. And then you are always going to have 2 to 3 more dogs to watch. So come back, watch, and ask questions and learn something from the other students. But if you give them that structure, they'll find a way to make it work. Okay, so on the student side of things, okay, show up on time. Do it. Just show up on time. It makes everything easier. Also, I hate being late for anything, so that's maybe a little bit more about me than you. Video your training at group classes, and if you aren't, because you're not sure about like the amount of time it's going to take, or if you don't want to ask someone to do it, get a tripod, stick it in the corner, wide angle lens attachment to your cell phone, film it, start it the dog ahead of you, stop it when on your way out, and just edit off the beginning and end. And now you have the video of your little bit of your lesson, right? If you don't know where to put the camera, ask your instructor. Hey, where do you think the best view of this sequence will be? Better yet, instructors, if you are trying to get your students to film their work more, tell them, bring your camera, set it up here. Or, oh, so-and-so is going to film for you, have them stand here. Okay. If you want them to take notes, because students, I think you should be taking notes because you don't remember anything. I don't remember it either. But we always think, oh, I'll remember that. No. It's gone. It's bye-bye, right? You get to talking, you get to driving home, you start making dinner, and you have zero idea what was said to you. So taking a few notes, if you haven't videoed your lesson, is a really good idea, right? Instructors, if you want them to take notes, ask them to. Set it up so that it's easy for them to take notes. Give them time. Kind of before you start the next class, maybe put that into the end of your class and go, all right, what are the 3 things you need to write down to remember for next week? And have them write it down. Since you're going to have clear themes and objectives for your classes, if you're doing a coursework class, if you're running sequences of courses, send them the course map ahead of time, right? Email it to them. As soon as you make that plan, email it out to them. Now they have something that they can print and write on so that they have the map. They're going to write down what they need to remember about that, and it can go into their training notes. Okay, but you can make that easy for them by giving them that handout ahead of time. Yeah, ask the simple questions, and it just keep. Hey, what do you think you should write down about this? What do you want to remember about this time? What do you need to remember for next time? What are you going to do when you come back? I find that students, that was like the number one thing that made them so pleased, was giving them the course map ahead of time. Made all the difference. And it was okay. Like, I think most of them at least opened it and looked at it a little bit before class. It was sometimes difficult when I would get behind on making the lessons, and it was like if I didn't get it out until late on Sunday, the Monday classes sometimes struggled a little bit, but you do the best you can. Yeah, so this comment is about the instructor providing a handout each week with bullet points and room for personal notes. It is a huge expectation, but sometimes that's what it would take. When we had our entire program and we started with just essential skills and built up from there was a whole workbook that one of my instructors put together of all the skills and why we're teaching those skills and what the big picture of that skill was going to be. That class had an entire workbook. That class cost a little bit more because it had so much extra detail into it. So that is also something to consider when when instructors are pricing classes, is how much time you're putting into it outside of that 60 or 90-minute class, because that to me is worth paying for, and it's worth charging for. as well. But yeah, I love giving students handouts because I think it creates that habit. I had more. Oh, right. And back to after the class, if you are taking notes, and you should be, students, you should ask yourself, like I mentioned earlier, what did you learn today? And this is an easy thing that you can wrap up with at class to get your students in the habit. Just have them with a notebook or a piece of paper, just anything, or their cell phones. They can jot it into their notes or text it to themselves. What did you learn today? What needs work? What do you need to work on this week that you want to continue working on from this lesson? How did you feel today during training? Was it too hard? Was it too easy? Were you overwhelmed? Were you just not into it? Like, it doesn't have to be something you share, but I think it's something that's important. And then how did your dog feel today? Just those 4 little questions after a class can be really, really helpful. And then you can kind of see over time, is this class working for me? Okay. So number 3, students, ask your questions. Try to not keep them bottled up. Ask your questions. Find some, it doesn't matter if you think it's a dumb question or a stupid question, ask it anyways. That's like usually my biggest regret is like I leave somewhere and I didn't ask a question. Ask the question. It's going to be okay. Ask it. Instructors, answer it, especially if it's something about that lesson. Take the couple of minutes and answer it. And then if it doesn't, if it's really not suitable to answer right then, like we talked about last week, work out a time when you can answer that question for that student. Students, repeat back the instructions before you go and do it. So if you've just run a little sequence, you got your feedback, you got what you're supposed to do next, repeat it back to your instructor, make sure you got it right, and then go do it. Taking that little bit of time to repeat it back, it's going to put it in your head. It's going to make you say it out loud, which is going to cement it into your brain better. You're going to get your work checked before you do it with your dog again. And your instructor is going to have to go, yep, all right, they got it. Because if you don't have it, if you can't repeat it back, that's also feedback for the instructor that they didn't explain it well enough to you. Okay? Or they didn't split it down well enough for you. So if it cannot be repeated back, it wasn't the right instruction. That means, instructors, that your instructions have to be clear and specific, and the last thing that they hear should be short, and it should be what they should be doing. Super recently, the last thing I told the student to do was what not to do. Blah, 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 no blind. The student immediately went and did the blind cross. I told her not to. But the last thing she heard from me was, don't do the blind. So she just did the blind cross. And I didn't ask her to repeat it back to me. It was a mess. It was terrible. It was fine. The blind cross was great. Dog got rewarded. No big deal. But it was a reminder of the last thing that the student should hear is what you want them to do. And if the instructions are really, really long, it's less likely that they'll be able to repeat it back to you, and it's less likely that they will be able to do it successfully. So short, sweet, to the point. If you want there to be lengthy explanation as to why you should do it this way and why the first way didn't work, that's fine. Do that. But the last thing that they should hear should be like one sentence, as short a sentence as possible. Have those keywords, feet here, eyes here, what to look for, things like that. Those keywords that they hear over and over again, and it should be what to do versus what not to do. So now I want to hear about what other qualities you think makes a good student. And we can discuss how best to do these things. I think I need to ask for about 15 seconds of reward my dog time after a sequence before feedback. Otherwise, I'm never going to remember the feedback. Yes, I think this is an excellent point. And probably one habit that, so this is like a two-way thing as well, because it's so funny that instructors are quick to try and get in there with that feedback. But also instructors get super frustrated when students don't reward their dogs. And I have felt it. I want to just get in there, and while the human learner, I can see it on their face that they're in a space where they can hear me, but the dog needs to be taken care of first. So I've totally been there where I want to jump the gun. And I want to get in there and I want to help and give feedback before they've taken care of the dog. So it was a rule of mine that I wouldn't give feedback until the dog had been rewarded and tended to, either released to sniff or put in a downstay or picked up, or it was the criteria for me that I wouldn't open my mouth until the interaction between the handler and the dog was done. And then the handler kind of gave me some cue. And sometimes I could just pick up on what the cue was because the dog would be clearly released and the handler would make eye contact with me, or the handler's just continuing to feed the dog and they would like nod their head at me, or because it wasn't required that the handlers had to be looking at me to receive the information. But it's a good reminder that we can, as instructors, we can't be annoyed when students don't reward their dogs and also be giving feedback before they've rewarded their dogs, because those two things are in conflict. If we're giving them feedback, if we're expecting them to focus on us and the feedback while they're supposed to be rewarding their dog, what will happen is they will stop rewarding their dog and they will immediately turn to you for the feedback. So you have to really focus on that part of your instruction. Is, are you giving them time to reward their dogs? And then if you're trying to change the habits, just make that a rule. Just tell your students, by the way, I'm not going to give you feedback until after you've rewarded the dog and you've tended to them and told them that they're on a break, put them on a station or a leash, pick them up, blah, blah, blah. You could even create a class over it of, we're going to play a game. How well, and time them, right? You can work on just reward, tend to the dog, ask for feedback, give the feedback, I think most students would be okay if you walk in and go, this week we're going to work on some new habits that I would like to work on to make this class better for everyone. I think students would be okay with that. Often an issue with other instructors. I want to reward my dog and get him in a down before the instructor starts talking. And if you are having a problem, like the instructor's trying to give you feedback before you're ready, just tell them, can I have a minute? Can I take care of him first? Because I think most instructors would be like, oh yeah, of course, because I know it's happened to me. And it has, a student has said, can you just give me a second? And I'm like, oh crap. Yeah, of course. Duh. Yeah, sorry. I got excited. Right? So sometimes we're not even aware of our own behavior as the instructor. We're just really excited to get in there and give you that feedback. Right? Sometimes as a student, I may start thinking about what happened in my question before I finish and I forget to reward my dog, right? It's this cycle that can slip up very, very quickly. And both the instructor and the student need to have some responsibility for it, right? So like I said, easy for instructors to say, I will not give feedback until you've taken care of your dog. And if you hold them to that criteria, I just wait them out. If if they haven't rewarded their dog, I don't remind them in that case. I try to let them figure it out. Like, oh, right, reward, tell the dog to do something. I won't let them flounder or think that I'm ignoring them, but try to go reward the dog, because I don't want to be that instructor that is constantly saying, reward your dog, reward your dog, reward your dog, reward. I don't want to be that person. So set the expectations, make it easy for them. So if they're new coming in, remind them until reward your dog. Yeah, that's exactly it. You know, talk to them. Okay, put them over here in a down so we can discuss this, blah, blah. Make it super easy. And as soon as that habit's formed, it's not a problem. It's so nice. I have everything on my list here. Right. So what we got on the reward your dog track. So what habits of students do you want them to have, and how can we, and so I'll kind of help you come up with a training plan essentially. So what habits do you want your students to have? And students, what habits do you think you should have that are just hard to create? Is it something that the antecedent arrangements of your class can be better about? So let me know your thoughts. So this comment, another thing I found frustrating was being interrupted mid-run over a particular obstacle performance, and the instructor wants to talk to you about it right then and there. It would often interrupt the flow, and the dog doesn't understand or may find it punishing. So this is a good point, and it really, it needs it's sometimes like a difference of philosophy, and also how like you would handle an error versus how your instructor might handle an error from their dog. So it is important to have these discussions about what the purpose of that sequence is, because when I'm training and the rewards are available kind of liberally, it might not be a big deal to just stop and reward in the middle. However, I always want to keep my loops clean. So if I wasn't planning to stop and reward at, say, the dog walk, I'm not going to, whether they got it right or if they get it wrong. So that's one thing, that if there's a difference of opinion on how to react to an error, then that's a conversation you have to have with the instructor. Because I had the opposite problem when I was wanting students to keep going and not stop when there was a mistake. It was really difficult because the learning history says always stop when there is a mistake. Okay, so it's just a discussion to have of what is the objective of this sequence? Am I trying to finish it? Am I stopping when there's a mistake? Am I running through the mistakes? Am I reacting like I would in a trial? Things like that. And then if there's just a difference in philosophy on how you would react to the error, then watch last week's episode and try to have that conversation with the instructor and kind of come to an understanding. But that's a really good point. What else? What other habits do you want your students to have, or things that maybe you would want more structure from your classes on? So students, if there's something that you would like to see kind of rewarded in class, what is it? Tell me what they've been working on at home and how that's going. Helps me identify how far to go with them in this class. All right. That's going to be different for, depending on what the class is and how much flexibility you have in the class. But this instructor wants to know what you've been working on at home. So ask them. So what did you, schedule it in 5 minutes at the beginning. I would usually do that in more like the foundation classes. What did you do this week? Because then I can have an idea of where to start them with the next thing. So yeah, most of the time the foundation classes always started with how did homework go? What did you do this week? We would train, then we would discuss homework. What are you going to do this week? So there would always be like a warm-up conversation, train, and then a debriefing. Right, especially if you send them home with specific homework, you want to know how that homework went. Most of the time, if they're not offering up how their homework went, it's because they didn't do it, which is okay, right? That's another thing. Like, it's okay if they didn't do the homework. If it's not okay, then you need to tell them that and let them know, like, if you don't work on this outside of class, we're going to have to do private lessons, or you're going to have to move classes if it's not okay. But if it is okay, it's okay. Because I do think it is okay if they didn't do homework outside of class. As long as their expectations of their dog and their progress is in check with that. You can't make them do the homework. You can't make them right? You can't, it's out of your control. You can make it as easy as possible that they did the homework. You can give them choices. Like, if you do the homework, you're going to see the results a lot faster. If we have to work on this only once a week in class, it's going to take a little bit longer, or you're going to need, private lessons, which cost them money. Or if they don't do this, maybe they're not going to see the results in trials that they're looking for, and that's also going to cost them money, both actual money and the figurative reinforcement bank money. So if they know the consequences of doing it or not doing it, it's up to them. My life got so much easier when I decided it was okay if they didn't do the homework. I got happier because I always felt like if the student left my class better than when they came in, that was enough, because that was maybe enough for them too. Not every student, and we don't know what lives are like outside of that class. So I think it's okay. If I ask them to do something, then I need to know if they have limitations, space, time, etc., and we can do some problem solving as to how they can manage a bit of it. Yeah, all of that. But if they don't know, like it's a thing. Like if they're not communicating that to you, then they don't know that they can. Ask questions versus let's see, how would I handle it? I would always ask, is this something you can work on at home? And then that would open the conversation of, yes, I can do this, or no, I can't do this. And then we would go from there. But equipment, time, energy, things like that, we don't know unless we ask. But getting them to do homework is probably the hardest habit to make happen, because we can't control it. We can make it as easy as possible, like giving them handouts, giving them video demonstrations. All of these things that take more time. And so it's maybe another talk or a discussion for another day, but the more time you put into making these things easy, the more you should be charging for your class. And then that's a whole another layer of complications, trying to keep your classes accessible for your students. I know it is definitely a struggle for me, because I would think, if I increase the rate of my class, am I going to lose clients that I really want to help? But I'm putting X, Y, Z into this, and it's all these hours, and I got to pay the bills. And so it's something to consider, that if you want them to go that extra mile, they might need to pay a little bit more for it. I get it all the time now with like the Finzi classes. People say that they have to sign up at Gold to be accountable for doing it. So that means they need to pay the money and get feedback, once or twice a day for 6 weeks to do it. Because if they're just left on their own, they paid a little bit of money, they have the materials, but they're not doing it. It can sometimes be the same with the group class. If they're paying a smaller amount and they're just showing up and they're running the course, and you suggest, hey, work on this, it might not be enough accountability. But if they pay a little more and they leave class with a handout and a link to YouTube videos of you seeing it, well, now that's a bit more accountability, because you've gone the extra mile to make that homework accessible to them, and they've gone the extra mile by paying for it. It's just another way of looking at it. Any other questions? What are we going to talk about next week? That's my question. This comment is, becoming a monthly virtual student has made me so much more accountable. The video on my camera now gets downloaded and posted daily. I mean, that it's a huge thing, right? Just knowing that you have that, just that little bit of, I paid for this. I was given an assignment. I was told to do something, and then you post it. And so it can work in a group class environment as well. But if you're putting, so students keep that in mind too. If you look at a website and go, wow, that's a pricey group class, maybe ask what you're getting besides that group class. What student behavior annoys me? um I don't know. I I'm very rarely annoyed by things nowadays. But the most recent one I will say is that if there's, and it's a little bit of what we talked about last week, if you are unhappy with something that I've done, I need to know what it is. So it's and I think this is difficult for everyone. It's very easy to give positive feedback, right? If you loved something, it's very easy to say, I loved this, you were great. And it doesn't even matter what service you're getting, right? A class, a meal, like if you love it, it's very easy to talk openly about it. But if you don't love something, it can be difficult to say what you didn't love about it because you don't want to sound mean or you don't want to hurt the other person's feelings. But if something did disappoint you and I don't know what it is, I don't know how to change it and I don't know how to make it better. Just like when I'm teaching, if I don't tell you what to change and what to make better, you don't know what to change and what to make better. So I guess that's the thing that's kind of on my mind most recently. If you have the comments over here are very nice, just really kind of driving home how good video is. Okay, so if you've got a last minute question, drop it in there. Otherwise, I think I'm losing my voice. Super fun. So let me know what we should talk about next week. I will go scour those two threads to see if there's some more things we can discuss about teaching agility and things like that. But otherwise, I'll come up with something else to talk about. I'll give you guys just a minute. You're welcome. Welcome. I'm glad you were here. Oh, how can students make things easier for you? I find editing out all the superfluous stuff out of my video helps you. It depends on like what it is. When we're talking about like video review, I like to see the whole loop because there's a lot of things that might get missed in the reset and the coming back to work. But if you're like moving equipment and things like that, I don't need to see that. I want to see the training and the as specific as possible to the assignment. But I mean, and usually this is actually what's important. If it's 10 reps, but they all look exactly the same, show me 2. I don't need to see 10 of the exact same thing. If you think there's a reason I need to see 10 because you're thinking that there's something different, then absolutely show them to me. But if they look exactly the same, 2. Ooh, Elise wants a Torch update. Well, I can talk about Torch for all day long, but he's currently upside down in his crate, asleep. He knows what to do on Monday evenings after several miles in the woods. But yeah, we can do a Torch update soon. Attending seminars, how to handle instruction that conflict. Yeah, we can talk about seminars. I think that's probably. Let me start a thread in the group about seminars to see what kind of the general questions are. All right. I think that'll about cover it. If you are catching up or watching after the fact and you have a question, it's actually easier if you drop the question as a new thread, new post in the group, because sometimes I will miss it if it's on this live video, because it's really hard to find when there's so many comments and they start to add up on the lives. So I will see you guys back again next week. Happy New Year.